We're about to begin in the next 2 minutes. Thank you so much to all those of you who are here. We're just waiting for some more people to join and we'll start in 2 minutes. We're also going live on YouTube in case you'd like to invite anyone. We're about to begin in the next 2 minutes.
I think it's 12 noon now, so let's start the program. Um, Happy New Year, everyone, and very warm welcome to this Education South Asia seminar. This is our first seminar this year, and as last year, we have very exciting and inspiring talks lined up for this year as well. This seminar series, as most of you who have been part of this series last year as well know, and if you're new and you're joining this seminar series for the first time, I'll just introduce the seminar series. This seminar series is a continuation of the conversation that we've been having since our online conference organized in July 2021, titled Rethinking Education in Post-Pandemic South Asia. And we are taking those conversations forward through these Education South Asia network, which is a collaborative platform for discussions around various issues related to education and South Asia. So thank you very much, everyone who have already joined Education South Asia Network, and do share information about this network to your friends and colleagues who might be interested. We organize a lot of different interesting talks, and we're working on a lot of different interesting issues together. So it'll be really nice to collaborate and work together. And we hope to take this work forward in more collaborative ways in future. So we are very pleased to have Professor Tariq Rahman today in our seminar series, and I would like to invite Mohini Gupta to introduce today's speaker. Over to you, Mohini.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradhan, and welcome to all of you to the first session of the year. We're really glad to have all of you here. I'm sure it's a sort of busy start to the year, but thank you for making the time. We're really excited to have amongst us our speaker for the day, Dr. Tariq Rahman, who will be speaking on education policies in Pakistan, intentions and consequences. Dr. Rahman is a Pakistani academic scholar and writer. He is based in Lahore and the author of many books and publications in the field of linguistic history and social linguistics, including language education and culture, language ideology and power, from Hindi to Urdu, a social and political history, and many more. He's been awarded several national and international awards to recognize his research and his scholarly work. Dr. Rahman has 2 doctoral degrees, a PhD and a DLit from the University of Sheffield. He's a distinguished national professor and dean at the Beacon House National University, Lahore. He's also a member of the Common Room at Wolfson College in the University of Oxford. We're extremely privileged to welcome you to the Education South Asia seminar today, sir. Thank you so much for making the time. I'll now hand over to you to start your presentation for the day. We're already looking forward to it.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for inviting me, Dr. Umar Pradhan, and especially Ms. Mohini Gupta, who has been corresponding with me and the initiative, etc., and for making it possible. Now, I will look at the education policies of Pakistan. However, for lack of time, I will not go into the details about the several documents. There have been several. I mean, 3 from 1947 to 48, not 47 to 58, then the 1959 Sharif report, and then the 1969 Noor Khan report, then the 1979 policy under General Ziaul Haq, 1998 policy of Nawaz Sharif, 2009 policy under Asif Zardari, 2017 policy once again under Nawaz Sharif, and then the latest 2020 policy. I'll go a little bit on that. I'll focus a little bit on that, textbooks especially, but really there is not enough time to dissect all these documents. What I will, if you want to know more about them, then Shahid Siddiqui has written a book. It is called Education Policies of Pakistan. It was published first in 2014. And the recent, a new edition has come in December 2020. So one can do that. Since I've been dabbling a little bit in language, especially language history and language policy, so please bear with me when I look at the education policies through the lens of the language of education. But first, let me look at the major aims, the features of language policy. So slides, please. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so these are the features of the education policies, all of them. I mean, look at all of them. They obviously different languages used, etc., but the emphasis is different. But basically, modernization, vernacularization, which means the spread of Urdu, privatization, and ideological orientation. We will look at all of them in turn, but as I said, there are certain major things in this, and not only through the lens of language, but also there are intended consequences and unintended ones, something which happened, which nobody thought was going to happen. It's also worth noting that there is a tension between the text, which is overt, what is on the surface, and the subtext. That means the deeper level, the covert level, if you can call it that. So the text and what the text is, let's say, the document of what the Constitution says about, let's say, language, which enables people to get jobs and so on. So let's look at the next slide, and that is about the Constitution. The Constitution says that the national language of Pakistan is Urdu. Arrangements shall be made for its being for official and other purposes within 15 years. 15 years from the commencing day. And what was that? That was 1973. That hasn't happened because this is an ideological aspiration, a nationalistic goal. It is not it is the text, the covert level. Actually what happened is covered by the escape clause, which is B. Subject to clause A, the English language may be used for official purposes until arrangements are made for its replacement by Urdu. That's more in the interest of the elite. So that is the escape clause. This hasn't, so far, the English is the language of the elite. It's the major domains of power. So this is the escape clause. Look at the third one. It says, without prejudice to the status of the national language, a provincial assembly may by law prescribe measures for the teaching, promotion, and use of a provincial language in addition to the national language. The only one which is used is Sindhi, and that has been used since British times. So really, this hasn't happened either. Language is important. After all, it has in Bordeaux's word something like cultural capital. It opens doors. It opens drawing rooms. It makes you move from in the socio-economic ladder. It gives you power. It gives groups power, etc. So it is something very important. That is why what the law says is something else, and what actually happens is something else. Now let's look at the population by language. Next one, please. Yes. Look at this. This is the 2017. And this is a percentage of the population, which is, by the way, 208 million in 2021. Okay, so it is 38.78% of these are native speakers, mother tongue speakers of Punjabi, 18.24 Pashto, 14.57 Sindhi, 12.19 Saraiki. Mother tongue speakers of Urdu are 7.08%, Balochi 3.02%, Hindko 2.24, Brohi 1.24, Kashmiri 0.17. One thing stands out. English is not mentioned there. And English, which is not mentioned, is the language of the domains of power, which means government itself, administration, higher administration, that is, the officer corps of the armed forces, higher education, research, and corporate sector, private elite education, public elite education too, public universities too, international mobility, flying, so on and so forth. All this. So that language is not even mentioned. But that is the part of the covert text, so to speak. Urdu, which is mentioned as the language of 7.57% people, mother tongue speakers, is actually spoken by many more people. If you consider something like literacy, then everyone who's literate is also literate in Urdu. They may be literate in Sindhi, but they're certainly literate in Urdu. So at least more than 60% speak. Because people who are not literate, but living in cities, milkmen, taxi drivers and so on, also speak Urdu. So really it is a language which is actually spread. And I once wrote an article on trucks, and there are really these, the language written on them, the very romantic lines written on them, etc., poetry, that is mostly in Urdu. Although the truck drivers are mostly Pashtuns, but the language which has spread, which goes from one province to the other, from Gilgit, Baltistan, all the way to Karachi and to Kabul, Quetta and Kabul, that language happens to be Urdu. So Urdu has spread actually very widely. So, so what are the real aims now? Next one, please. I mean, what are the bitter truths, if you want to call them bitter? Okay, the facts, so to speak. One, about South Asia as a whole. One, that a foreign language not used by the masses was the elevated language of formal domains of power. I mean, Sanskrit, Prakrits were not Sanskrit, then Persian, and then English. At one time, if you didn't know Persian, you couldn't get a job in the Mughal court or in the Sultan's court, etc. You couldn't become a scribe. And of course, English, which is there even now. So second point is that the language of power was always rationed out. It wasn't imposed. It wasn't that, you have to study Sanskrit, or you have to study Persian, or you have to study English. No, nothing like that. Most people don't have to study at all. So actually, most people were condemned to the street not to study, not to learn any language formally. Informally, of course, they would learn their mother tongue, but formally, none. They couldn't aspire to get to the ladder which led to power in this field. I mean, they could be fighters in the military. They could be great landlords, landowners, etc., and have that domain of power. Yes, but not in the bureaucratic one, not in the one which deals with the written word. In that, they wouldn't be. And that, people who dealt with the written word, as the modern state came, they were more needed. And therefore, others were, the number of people who were pushed out of the pyramid of power were those who somehow could not take this Russian language because it was expensive, because it wasn't available in their village and so on, etc. So that. The third consequence is that the elite acquired this language of power extremely well. And therefore, it also became a social class marker. English is now a language of power and a marker of elite identity in Pakistan as well as India. So there it is. So these are the home truths. Now let's get back to the first aspect of it. That is when I said the aims, the first aspect, modernization. Next slide, please. By modernization, actually, the point is to create a powerful, modern, technologically self-reliant economic and military nation state. We will take the words nation and state separately also, but at the moment, nation state, that is modernization. But the indicators chosen to measure them as far as education is concerned are first, how many people can write, literate, and read. The second one is higher education. How many universities are there? Of course, there are others: industrialization, the creation of heavy machinery, creation of weapons, etc. But they come with the skills which are dependent upon reading, writing, and going for higher degrees. Okay, so let's look at this. I mean, there's some partial success. I mean, after all, in 1951, in Pakistan, literacy was 18.9%. And now, according to the Human Development Report of 2020 of UNDP, cited by the Pakistan Economic Survey of 2021, it is 60%. But then if you look at the region, then Sri Lanka, 91.7%, Maldives, 97.7%, Bhutan, 66.6%, India, 74.4%, Bangladesh, 73.9%, and Nepal, 67.9%. If you look at this comparison, then it's really not a great achievement. Next one, please. In this one again, there was one university only, the University of the Punjab, in 1947, and in 2020 there were 224 higher HEIs, higher education institutions, out of 137 public universities, 87 private ones. And then the armed forces have also owned universities. They run universities. The Army has 4, the Air Force has 1, and the Navy has 1. And of course, then there are schools, colleges, vocational training institutions, non-formal educational centers. And so the population in 1951, West Pakistan only was 33.7 million, and now it is 208 million. There is some growth, but actually not adequate. The real problem is, are they really competent universities? Now, according to the HEC itself, Higher Education Commission report itself, it says that they haven't entered the top, not even the top 300 of the world's universities. And they are trying their best, they say, but they haven't entered that. So there is a Vision 2025 of the Higher Education Commission, which says there will be 3 kinds of tiers: Tier 1 universities, Tier 2 universities, and Tier 3 universities, and the Tier 1 universities will be research universities. But that is to come. So far as modernization is concerned, the success is limited, let's say. Now let's look at the next one, privatization. What does it really mean? Well, actually, you look at it this way. I mean, the overt text is that the private sector is coming forth to help us. There is a private-public partnership, and we are happy that the private sector is doing this, because everybody should help in education. But if you look at the covert text, what I call the covert text, the deeper one, the subtext, whatever you may call it, it is that actually the state spends something like 2% of the GDP. Maybe a little more sometimes, maybe a little less sometimes. During the COVID days, it was a little less because electricity and other things, etc., institutions were closed down, so the bills were less. But sometimes it may be more, 2.2% or so. They say the aim is to spend 4%, but it hasn't happened. And on whom is this spent? This is spent on the public schools, public universities, and so forth, because most of the private schools are for the elite. They are of the best quality, and they are for the elite. So just if you look at the numbers, this is, it says 191,065 public schools 2017. In 2017, 112,381 private schools, and 27.69 million students in public schools, 19.80 million students in private schools, and 6,371 in the maktabs, mosque school, adult literacy centers, and so on. But this doesn't actually tell you much. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, this tells you more. And this is from the survey, and this is the annual status of education report. These come every year, and there was one in 2021 also. I've got the 2015 one because actually this gives the best sort of statement of this. It says that the poorest quartile has the highest level of children enrolled in government schools, 87%, whereas the remaining 9% of the children enrolled in the private sector. On the other hand, the richest quartile has the highest number of children enrolled in private schools, the lowest percentage of children in government schools. Right. The point is that actually the elite is given up on government schools. And when that happens, they deteriorate. So by private schools, which the government considers a very good thing, private-public partnership and all, actually it is giving up on, in a sense, it is giving up on the education of the masses, which is supposed to be a duty by the constitution, which but it is not happening. The elite is educating itself, and other people, some of them are out of school, and others are being educated, but not at a very high level. So that is what privatization is. It is something which is actually was meant to modernize, etc., was meant to make people 100% people literate, etc. But this has not been achieved. What has happened is that it has concentrated the best education in the elite and left others with either lower standards or high and dry. Next one, please. Now, this is something, binocularization, which means the spread of Urdu. This has succeeded very well, as I said before. But this is, what does it mean? What is it meant for? It was meant actually as a unification device. It was meant to counter the ethnic pressures of Bengal to begin with, East Bengal, because they were more in number. I mean, 55.56% or something, around 56%. So actually they were more in number. And they were stressing on the Bengali language as a symbol of their mobilization, of their identity, etc. So it was meant to counter that. And then there was, of course, the same thing by the Sindhi, and then the Pashtun and Balochi and Brahvi and so on. The ethnic pressures from here were also strong. All this was countered through Islam and Urdu. We'll come to Islam later, Urdu here. And because Urdu, it did spread, as I said, so that part was successful. And it did become the language of vital communication, certainly. But then it was also opposed by the ethnic counter elites who found this grievance, the grievance of Urdu being imposed upon them. I will look at the single national curriculum, etc. later. And although I've written that Urdu has been the ideology carrying language of Pakistan, but I haven't explained what that is, I'm going to come to that a little later. Now, let's look to the, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. So here, let me introduce you to the single national curriculum. This is the latest. I mean, the present government has introduced this in the name of equality, equity, social justice, etc. But remember that curriculum, certain books from class 1 to class 5 in madrasas and Urdu medium schools and English medium schools are the same, but the division of money is still what it used to be. That means the infrastructure of the private English medium schools, elite schools, is still much better. And also because that 2% of the GDP has not increased. So the infrastructure of government schools is not any better. I have actually seen girls traveling 10 miles on the back of a donkey in Balochistan, a long time back though, but I've heard that this hasn't changed much. So, I mean, let's look at these new, up to class 5, that is, in Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan. These are the books which have been introduced. And in this, for science and maths, they are in English. And for general knowledge, which is called Waqf-e-Amma and Urdu, of course, they are in Urdu. So whereas English medium schools used to have all books in English, now except Urdu, now there is another book which they will have, which is in Urdu. So the spread of Urdu, let's say, has increased. However, the final examination of these English medium students is going to be the O-level and the A-level examination from England, and that is going to be in English. So that is going to be in English. So actually things haven't changed much. The rest of the thing, they're going to study English, and they're going to acquire the cultural capital which this language brings to them. So that is certainly there. The other thing, they look at the number 4, which is that these Urdu textbooks, as I said, these were ideology carrying languages. Now, why I said that was that in one of my previous books, I don't know whether you will be able to see it on stage, but let me just try to show it to you. This is called Language, Ideology and Power. This was published by the Oxford University Press here in Pakistan in 2002. And this is the Indian edition, which was published by Orient Black Swan in 2008. So this is available in India. Okay, so this book, I counted the lessons of all the languages, compulsory or optional, from class 1 to class 12. And I found that then I looked at the lessons which were about Islam, Islamic personalities, etc., nation, nationalism, wars, and of course the military, the glorification of the military, etc. I found all these lessons and anti-India lessons. And I found that 40% of the Urdu books carried this ideology. I mean, this is Islam as a cohesive symbol, creating of Pakistani nationalism as an exclusive kind of a device, constructing India as the other, glorification of the armed forces, instruments of cohesiveness of the nation, etc. This, I found them 40% of those books. Those are 2002 books, they're no longer there. But these ones also do the same. And there is something which is called the master narrative of Pakistan. And recently, this book has come only 3 weeks back. This is by Professor Muhammad Wasim, a friend of mine. And this has been published by Hearst in England. I think you'll find it much more easier than I would. So here it is. It's called Political Conflict in Pakistan. It's got a whole chapter on the master narrative and how it was formed. I've explained it in a few words, this othering and so on of India and so on, but he's got a whole chapter on that. This is also part of the textbooks of Urdu in class, from class 1 to class 5 now. Let's turn to the next one, please. Okay. So the first and the second are what I have said before, but look at the third one. Urdu textbooks from class 2 and 5 have Islamic themes, refer to the personages sacred for the Muslims. No doubt there are 96.97% Muslims in this country, but there are 1.73% Hindus. There are 1.27% Christians, and Ahmadis 0.09 who are not considered Muslims, and others 6 and so on, 0.02%. Now, if you look at that Mr. Jinnah's name is also called Rahmatullah Alayh. I mean, sacred blessings are used for him, Poet Muhammad. I have no problem with that. My point is that if they were part of the Islamic studies books, that would be fine. They're studied by Muslims. But what happens when children who are non-Muslims are exposed to this book in the class? Remember, class 1 to class 5, they're very small children. There is an STPI report on it, Sustainable Development Policy Institute. They wrote a report on it, connecting the dots. And they said how much they exclude Hindu children and how they are sometimes called by their class fellows, children are like that, they are called infidels. And how the teachers create a kind of cognitive, a kind of atmosphere which puts them in, makes them uncomfortable. And I'm using a soft word actually. Perhaps it's more than that. And what happens to these children when they go home and hear other truths, so to speak? Cognitive dissonance. It is against the Constitution actually to impose your religion on someone. It's against Pakistan's Constitution. Yes, but this is not being done in the Islamic studies textbooks. This is being done in the Urdu textbook. And the text says that, look, we are teaching Urdu, but in that Urdu, other things are being taught too. So I've emphasized this point of view because, hardly anybody notices it as to how children of other faiths feel. That's why I have emphasized this. Next one, please. Okay, so the textbooks in Urdu and English glorify the military, of course, carrying lessons on pilot officer Rashid Minhas. I don't know whether you've heard of him, pilot officer Rashid Minhas in 1971. He is a flying instructor, was Bengali. He was flying a plane. He wanted to, the flying instructor wanted to take the plane to India because he wanted to serve his country, which was to become Bangladesh. Rashid Minhas snatched the controls from him. The plane crashed, and Rashid Minhas is a hero here. I have nothing against Rashid Minhas. He did what he thought was right. But the point is that all this is glorified, and Bangladesh nationalism, Bangladesh identity now is perhaps very different from this. So the flying instructor is the hero there. So we should have reconciled ourselves, and the children should have been taught a lesson of peace. But that doesn't happen. If the heroes are chosen like this and emphasized, you can say both are heroes in their own way. That would be fine, but this is what happens. Students are given an anti-India prover orientation in Waqf-e-Amma class 1. The Indian and the Bangladesh flags are absent. Nepal is shown. And the whole of Kashmir state is included in the map of Pakistan. The following words are written: Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. One could have said that this is a disputed area, as very often textbooks did earlier. But now in class 2, it is what is said illegally occupied. That obviously does not contribute to peace. Next one, please. So then we've been talking about this covert text, this hidden undertext, etc. What are these? This is what the reality is. Actually, in most education policies, I don't know whether you will agree or not, but here it is, my take on this. It is to allow elite groups to acquire, consolidate, and preserve power. That is in Pakistan at least, and I think in the rest of South Asia too, that is done by the preservation of English as an elite preserve. Not spreading it out everywhere in the same way, but preserving it for the elite as a kind of a treasure, as a kind of an asset, as a balance in the bank, so to speak. Next is to allow the nation state to gain power internally as well as outside, externally, which is, of course, by modernization, creating better technology, weaponry, and so on and so forth. And that is happening too. but at a cost, because if the cost on the military is so much, then that comes out from the cost on education, from the cost on health, and so on and so forth. So that is happening. Unfortunately, it's happening elsewhere too. It's also happening in the rest of South Asia. But at the moment, we are talking about Pakistan. And wherever it is happening, I would say that it does not help peace. The third one is to appease and help the masses to increase their entry into the domains of power. So that too does happen. There is a movement up: government, bureaucracy, military, judiciary, media, commerce. But this is subject to elite closure, which means, the elite closes its ranks. There is a pyramid sort of a thing, and at the top, there are very few. And here, the closure is through first through English. Second, it is through better teachers. If you have more money, you hire better teachers, better teacher training. So the best English medium schools, Beacon House, for instance, and City School and Grammar School, and so on and so forth. In Pakistan, I know about the change of schools here. I don't know about the change of schools in India, but these schools, all of them, have better teachers, and they give better training to teachers. They can afford it. Better classrooms, infrastructure, new ways of doing things, etc. All this costs money. So the elite closure is through this. So it is people, yes, do climb up, but all these things stand in their way. They don't help them. The language doesn't help them. The fact that they have learned, they have sort of memorized facts through uninteresting books. Their teachers have been beating them, and they've generally run away. Some of them have run away from school, etc. Girls have been sitting on the banks of donkeys and coming to school, which means many of them drop out, etc. So these are impediments in their ways. So yes, it does help, but it doesn't help everyone. It helps some more and others less. Right, now next one, let's look at what went wrong. Unintended consequences of unifying policies. Once again, let's just remind ourselves that the unifying policies are the spread of Urdu and Islamization. So about the spread of Urdu, I have said enough. And if you want to know more, how the elite in Pakistan, West Pakistan, that is, which was at that time mostly the Punjabi elite, helped by the elite of UP, Urdu-speaking elite. They were together at that time to counter Bengali ethnic nationalism and Pashtun nationalism and Sindhi nationalism. All this, you can have a look at this old fossil of mine. This is called Language and Politics in Pakistan. So this has looked at issues of this kind. Okay. But now let me look at the next thing, next unifying device, Islamization. Well, what happened was, this also was meant to counter the same forces of ethnicity, etc. The idea was that, the Islam will be used in the service of the nation. It'll create a nation. It'll make us different from India. Otherwise, why should we have separated? So it wasn't enough to say that now that we have, let's live in peace, and we are there. Why did America separate from Britain? They are there. They don't have to be different from the British and everything. Our rulers didn't do that, and ideologues did not do that either. So what happened was that Islam, as a unifying force, as a political ploy, so to speak, was used, and it shifted the focus to the sectarian debates also. Because when discourse, any discourse, but this discourse in particular, when you shift to religion, then you do have discourses within that religion. And some of them can be sectarian ones. So here the sectarian ones also came up. That's why, Shias, 15 to 20% of the Pakistan Muslim population, and there were so many attacks on them from Zia-ul Haq's times. Unfortunately, and I say it with great pain, the same is happening in India. As the discourse shifts towards religion in the service of the state, let's say, not religion per se, but religion in the service of the state, attacks on minorities, etc., declaring them as the other, will increase. But one other thing which happened here, look at the last point. When you focus so much upon religion, then interpretation of the holy texts will also be undertaken by many kinds of people and groups, etc. So the interpretation of jihad, which was taken up, it could be people like Sir Sayyid, etc., who said it is purely defensive and nothing else. It's just a defensive war, and everyone has the right to fight a defensive battle. But it also could be someone like Sayyid Qutb, who said that jihad is eternal, forever, and for the conquest of the earth. Anyone can, then you sort of give the initiative to others. The more religion you teach, the more initiative you give to other people to interpret it. They want to interpret it. Now, at present, in the 2020 syllabus, the one which is being in practice now, from class 1 to class 5, the children are to be taught the Holy Quran. Now, Muslim children are taught the Holy Quran by their parents anyway. So, but this is in the parents' hands, and the interpretation is in the parents' hands too. And they don't have to interpret; they just teach the Arabic. Now, again, they are to be taught in Arabic, but if some teacher wants to interpret, etc., certain verses, then we can do nothing about it. We've given the initiative to them, and we've closed it off. 5 years, and that is it. You've got to learn the whole thing. So whether the pressure is more on the child or less, etc., whether the child can take it or not, that doesn't matter. So this is what this new syllabus, this new syllabus has done. Interpretations can be different. And I hate to present this book to you because it's completely unreadable, but this is my last book called Interpretations of Jihad in South Asia, Du Gruyter, and I think Oxford does have a few copies. Okay. So this poses a great danger, that there is more religion in the air, more people talk about it, more people can interpret it, and some of those interpretations, not all, but some of those interpretations can be very alarming, even militant. That, I think, is something which those who began using religion for other purposes, perhaps they thought only for good purposes, perhaps they thought it would make people better, because that is one side of all religions. It does. There's a moral code. You find solace, you find comfort, but this is the unintended consequence of it. So I should conclude now, because I think I've spoken enough. Well, the education policies have failed the people of Pakistan, as there are still 22.8 million children out of school. Most are not taught very well. However, the elite is taught quite well, and certain technologies, especially those which relate to the expansion of national power, they are a product of some of the institutions and universities for technological development, especially in the fields of weapons, and also heavy machinery. That has happened. But the spread of Urdu is opposed by the ethnic counter elites in the name of justice, and because they say it is a part of internal colonialism. And Islamization has failed the ruling elite, since Islam is increasingly being interpreted in fundamentalist ways which see the elite as westernized, and therefore itself lacking in Islamic legitimacy to rule. So the point is that Pakistan's language and education policies which, as I said, have failed the people, are also now failing the long-term interests of the very elite, which has promoted them. Thank you very much. I'll stop there, and I will welcome questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rahman. That was extremely comprehensive and so sort of eye-opening. And at so many points, I could relate so much just in terms of education policies of other countries, and especially India, that I've been working on as well. So thank you so much. That was a really interesting talk on education, politics, language, elite closures, and yeah, that was really fascinating. Thank you so much. I'm not going to waste too much time. There are some questions on the chat here. So I'd first like to invite Cecilia Moinuddin to ask her question. Cecilia, are you here?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello,
Yes.
Thank you for a really interesting talk. I've been very curious about the effects of this national curriculum on the schools in Pakistan, because I'm running a school in a village in South Punjab. And I was wondering, we've all been seeing these pictures circulating about, showing these quite sort of traditional gender norms with the sort of husband, father and the son sitting in Western clothes on the sofa, and then the mother and daughter are sitting on the ground. I think they were making tea or something, and they're wearing shalwar kurta and dupatta and so on. So I was wondering what kinds of ideologies of gender do these new textbooks promote? And then you were also talking about the way English is being used more, and it sounded like it's primarily science and maths that are supposed to be taught in English. But how is that actually going to work in a village where the teachers don't speak English and the children never get to a level of understanding enough English to understand what the textbooks say? So they just learn, by rote learning to repeat the things that they hear. But it's sort of like you're repeating the Arabic of the Quran, where they don't understand the meaning.
Yeah.
So English is sort of, it gives them, if they learn English, it gives them access to the elite. But the fact of using English in these new textbooks seem to actually reduce the ability of social climbing, in fact.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what your take is on that.
Right. Yes. Excellent questions, both of them. Yes, that is true. The ideology which is there is that women are the ones who are going to keep the identity, our so-called in brackets, let's say, inverted commas, our essentially Muslim Pakistani identity. They are going to keep it intact through their dress and conduct and so on and so forth. But then there is this male who can do other things, etc., in order to bring home the money which runs the house. So this, of course, the gender norms are there. And of course, this has been there since colonial times, and people have written on it. This hasn't changed. But if you look at the 2002 books, you'll find it much more over there. In this, there are photographs of the other kind of women also sit up sometimes on the sofa, etc., and so on. But if you look at the previous pre-2002 books, things are very different. And then you will find that the Urdu books are going to endorse these gender norms much more than the English ones. So there's a difference between the English and the Urdu ones. So yes, it is there, and it hasn't all gone, but it has, let's say, some changes have occurred. Okay, next one. I don't know if you have looked at the Peely report. This is the report by the British Council, and they looked at the teachers' competence in English. And they found that most teachers of class 10 failed the class 5 examination in English. And this was 8 years back, okay? So of course they will not. It is an extra burden. And you're absolutely right that it actually, science and maths, which they possibly understood in Urdu, although that wasn't their mother tongue either, that they possibly did, even that has been taken away from them. This is a fact. This is very valid criticism. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for the question, and thank you, Dr. Rahman, for your comprehensive answer. There are two questions here from Nainika Dinesh, and I'll ask them on her behalf. The first one, Dr. Rahman, is even though the general education policy has remained the same over the years in its aims, have the implications or execution of these aims changed at all with the right to education being passed in 2012? And the second question is, are the trends that are seen with schools, that is of changes in textbooks and curriculum, also the same in higher education institutes as well?
The first part I understood has the execution been different, but the second, which was the
second one, is the trends that you spoke of in terms of the textbooks and curriculum. Is it the same for higher education institutes as with primary schools?
Okay, right. So the first one, executions, yes, they have changed in different areas, different kind of let's say policies to execute the major policies. They have been different. For instance, there is the what is called the public school or the cadet college. So cadet college, public schools, there were very few of them. And then actually in 1966, there was a Hamid-ur-Rahman Commission report, not the famous one after the 1971 war, but there was an earlier one, 1966, Hamid-ur-Rahman Commission report. The Hamid-ur-Rahman Commission report pointed out that public schools, in fact, break the law. The law is that the government must treat all its citizens as equals. And here are some, children who are being treated differently. Their schools are much better, etc., and the state is doing it at its own expense. And what happened was, but there was an escape clause. The escape clause was that this means that you should take in more children from the have-nots. That was the escape clause. Now, in reality, that didn't happen. They did take a few, but that didn't really happen. But they did expand. So the execution was in the negative direction, that they expanded the number of these public schools and cadet colleges in other areas. That is, they were not only in the major cities, in other areas, deprived areas, they call them. They are deprived areas in a sense. But the boys who go, these are boys' schools. The boys who go there are not from deprived families, so to speak. They are sometimes from lower middle class families. They are, let's say, in cadet college, Jhelum, for instance, boys go. They are the sons of JCOs, sons of officers too, but also sons of JCOs and sometimes NCOs, junior commissioned officers, non-commissioned officers, that way. So that is there. So this was there. And I mean, the expansion was, in a sense, yes, more towards people who were earlier, who did not go to such schools, but it wasn't towards everyone, even in not really towards the masses, but lower middle class, yes, masses, no. That was there. Secondly, the execution, English medium schools, for instance, they have been very slow to actually teach what they've been asked to teach. Even now, the books are there, and the books are in Urdu, but the emphasis is on English. So the execution of the policy of the school is, because the children will be finally examined in English, why bother too much about the Urdu books? So that way, yes. And then, of course, small changes. In some governments, there has been more emphasis upon creating more literate people. All sorts of things were done for it. Ziaul Haq's incidentally actually went out. Many things he did wrong, but this one, in this, he both in terms of literacy, he spread it, and also in terms of challenged children. They say because Ziaul Haq's own daughter was challenged, might be, but nevertheless, yes, the number of institutions devoted to children challenged mentally or otherwise was much more in those days. And so those things have happened, yes. As far as the
yes. Maybe you could quickly respond to the second part.
Yeah, higher education. Colleges have textbooks. Universities, the teachers can give whatever readings they want to give, etc. But generally, the trend is to either ignore the 1971 war or to say that it was only India which did it. Nothing about the Bengalis themselves, not their aspirations, not that Pakistan's military action was wrong, uncalled for, or anything, nothing like this. So 1965 war, either not taught, ignored, or that on the 6th of September 1965, India attacked without a word about the Operation Gibraltar, etc. before that. So yes, in the higher education too, critical thinking in the real sense and real history, as far as possible, truthful history is not taught. They can give readings on their own, but generally the kind of readings they gave are also perhaps not the very best, unless the places, some school like Lumps, where the kind of people they have in academia, the faculty is such that they may, but otherwise in higher education also. And certainly up to BA, it is very much the same story.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rahman, for covering both questions. We have two more questions. So why don't we take both of them together, and then maybe we can wrap up with an answer to both. So one is from Bhabesh. Bhabesh, would you like to switch on your mic and ask?
Yeah, hello. Hi, Professor. Thank you so much for the lecture. And I'm Bhabesh, and I'm from India. And quickly, I wanted to ask that the whole idea of language that you had talked about, and that English is a language of elite in places of power as well as educational institutions. I was curious to know your side are there other cultural factors that affect the perception of teachers towards students? So, for example, if let's say in Punjab, there are students coming from minority areas, from Balochistan or from other areas, and their way of thinking, their way of dressing, their way of speaking, and everything is very different from what the majoritarian way is or the elite way is. How does that affect the perception of teachers towards a good and a bad student? And they make perceptions beforehand before even trying to see whether a child is how good or bad he or she is. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Yes.
Sorry, thanks so much, Bhabesh. I'll just quickly invite Parvati to ask her question as well. Then maybe we could go on to Dr. Rahman to answer both, if that's okay, just in the interest of time. Okay, Parvati, you've raised your hand. Would you like to ask your question as well?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for giving opportunity to ask the question. And I'm very much thankful for Dr. Rahman to present such a beautiful, informative presentation. And I really liked it because I have a background of English language studying and teaching, as well as English language textbook development and curriculum development. So I have a query, like as a novice researcher, I found that Kashmiri Saivism, or let's say tantric philosophy, is very much powerful in our space, like in our Southeast Asian context and cultural spaces. So my focus is, have you looked into through the socio-cultural perspective towards Sanskrit language, and as I believe that our Sanskrit might be the root of all the languages of our space, our area. So have you thought from that perspective and discussed on any particular research? So I would like to know, and that would be very much helpful for me as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, Bhavesh, okay. The honest answer is I haven't done research on this, on the teachers' perceptions. So I don't know. However, there are stories which have come out because I was researching a book on wars lately, and Pashtuns came up to me, and Pashtun students said that even in Lahore, they were sort of stigmatized because they came from the Pashto-speaking areas, and it was feared that they would be something like terrorists and so on and so forth. So yes, those stories are there. But to do proper research on that would mean that one should, carry out a survey, and I haven't done that. The SDPI report, which I quoted earlier, connecting the dots, did say that some teachers in Sindh, in the lower schools, etc., discriminated against Hindus. That is also there. But at the same time, I've heard stories of very positive action by teachers towards minorities also. So, I mean, which is more and which is less, I really don't know. But yes, this does happen. On the other hand, there are teachers who actually support minorities. They have formed groups to support them, etc. So that also happens. Second one, the Sanskrit. For a person who tried to learn the Devanagari script and, I learned it, etc., but I could not acquire enough Sanskrit to be able to read it's a difficult question to answer. However, something like 29%, according to one survey of 1,000 words of Urdu, 29% vocabulary of Urdu comes from Sanskrit. So Urdu Hindi are really the same language, and the roots of Sanskrit are the same. That certainly is there. Now, and at one time, what is Taxila? Parini was born here. Parini was born something from 17 miles from a place I know, Salutra or Salatura, and he taught in this university. So Sanskrit. This was I once wrote an article in which I quoted someone else saying that perhaps the Rig Veda was written here in the Punjab. And so Sanskrit was taught very well here. Unfortunately, one of the negative consequences of what I would call very narrow-minded policies and practices was that after 1947, Sanskrit, nobody was taught good Sanskrit. So Sanskrit documents are lying in the Punjab University library with nobody to read them. Hindi is taught. Some people learn it for different reasons. I taught it to myself for my research. I'm not very good in it, but then I'm not very good in Urdu either. So anyway, I mean, okay. So Sanskrit is ignored in this country now. But yes, the roots of Sanskrit are certainly there. Urdu and other languages, Hindko and Punjabi, etc., all of them are connected with Sanskrit. That is certainly there. And it would be great research if somebody does it to find out more about the roots of the other languages of Pakistan and their connection with Sanskrit.
Very fascinating. Thank you so much, Dr. Rahman. I know we're past the time. We're 2 minutes past, but there are some more questions, and I'd like to take maybe one last one before we wrap up, if that's okay. Okay.
Sure.
Shak has a question here. Shak, would you like to ask the question yourself?
Okay, thank you, Moinisi. Thank you, Dr. Rahman, for your great lecture. It was a great opportunity to learn from you about various dimensions of education policy making process in Pakistan. So I have a very simple question. That is, you talked about curriculum, single national curriculum framework 2020. So I wanted to ask you about its implementation process. What has been its implementation process, one? And next is there any possibility in the curriculum policy or government policy about contextualizing curriculum at the local and provincial level? Because in Nepal, we have also a new curriculum, national curriculum framework 2019, and it's it is supposed that this curriculum would be contextualized at the provincial and local level based on their context. that has been said, but that has not been happened in Nepal. So I became kind of curious to learn about the context in Pakistan.
Okay, right. Look, very good question. But look, after the 18th Amendment, the education in Pakistan is a provincial subject, which actually means that the central government cannot impose a single curriculum on all the provinces. That's the letter of the law. Sindh has not accepted this curriculum. Okay, so it is only there where the PTI rules. It rules in KP, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it rules in the Punjab, and it has got allies in Balochistan. So there also. And then, of course, Kashmir, etc. So there, it has, these areas are the ones, of course, the federal capital. So these are the ones where this curriculum is being taught at the moment. Now, if you were asking about the local input into it, then I'm afraid if by local means different small towns, etc., small languages spoken in different places, that input, theoretically, it is there, because people from different provinces did come and sit down when they made this curriculum. There were people from different provinces, but these were officers, these were officials from these different provinces. So actually, if you mean input by people on the ground, such as local teachers of primary, etc., and students and so on, that certainly is not there. Then there's a big difference between, look at the size of Nepal and the size of Pakistan. In Nepal, it is much easier to have a single national curriculum. But in Pakistan, even from that point of view, it would be very difficult. It's a multi-ethnic state, multi-religious too, in a sense, although 96.7% are Muslims, but still multi-ethnic, and the languages, 5-6 major languages, and a total of 72 languages, out of which 4% of these are most people have not even heard about, but they are languages, nevertheless. They are spoken by people. So that way the input is not there. I mean, there is almost, whatever the letter of the law may say, there is nothing in even Punjabi or Pashto or and Sindhi or Balochi, etc., in this national, in this curriculum. So that way there is very little real local input.
Great. Thank you so much.
We've
unfortunately run out of our time today, and we'll have to conclude our program for today. Thank you so much, Professor Tariq Rahman, for very enriching talk, and especially wonderful to learn about this rich language resource in Pakistan, as well as the ways in which language and power are so intertwined together. Especially your idea about the concept of elite closure and practices and policies in Pakistan was really interesting to learn more about. Very inspiring, and a lot to learn. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to all of.
Well, it's very nice. It's very nice talking to you all, and thank you very much, Mohani. It was very nice talking to you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Give my regards to your parents also.
Yes, thank you so much.
In Delhi, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and thank you for all our participants as well. We had a very interactive session today. Thank you to all for joining us today. And the recording of this talk will be available in our YouTube channel. It was live streamed as this talk was taking place. So the recording of this talk will be available in our YouTube channel. So please do share the link and the information about the network with your friends and colleagues who might be interested. We'll keep you posted on our future activities as well. So thank you once again, Professor Rahman, and for joining us today. We're really grateful for your time.